Vroom, vroom.
Right, we're waiting for the number plate to come for the back. So we're just looking around the car, and I said to John, have a look at the steering, John, because obviously it's pretty important. So this is a leather coupling that goes in there. And then what it does, it has bolts that go through there with a little spacer. That goes in there, and then it has a spacer like that, and then you have a nut. Well, the nut has a split pin. Yeah, and anything to do with the steering on a Bugatti has got a split pin. Well, of course, this had spring washers which were the wrong size and no split pins. So anyway, and then leather coupling, it wasn't exactly beautiful, you know. I mean, it's got great bits missing and that. So luckily, Timothy keeps these in stock, so we just went and got a new one of them. So that's the thing. But you see, the idea is that when you tighten up on a piece of leather, you can't tighten it up solid. It goes up, and that is why you have to have a slip pin. But obviously, all the other things are slip pins as well. So what we're doing now, we're sorting out a decent set of bolts, and obviously we will split pin that, which is what it should be. Right, so now we split pinned it, but that is another thing again. What it is, these taper pins get split pinned, but if you look at the other side, look, it's gone in. And then what happens is, the holes in this, the hole in that is smaller. So when you tighten that up, the taper pin opens the end of the steering column.
Oh, that's easier.
It's got a slot in it. So when you pull that taper pin up, you're not just putting a thing through there and relying on the bolt to drive it. You're relying on the taper pin, opening that out and causing it to be solid almost, and that is the thing that actually drives it. Obviously, if it was loose, obviously the taper pin would still drive it, but that's not how it should be done. So when you can't see the other end, like that, that's always a worry to think, well, someone's done it up and they ain't really done it up. So then the next thing is, years ago, Geoffrey St John was at Brands Hatch, and he had quite a big accident in one of his cars. Well, he not desperate, bad enough. And what happened was, the bolt was split pinned. But somehow or other, again, it's only a very small 7mm nut. And when you tighten it up, obviously that's all got to be made very carefully. And what happened was, the head of the bolt fell off, because it's got the split pin through there. So that bit fell off. And slowly, this taper pin worked its way out and fell out, and he had no steering. So from then on, the big tip for anybody who went racing or did anything, you have that sticking out, probably 1/4 of an inch, and you drill a hole in it, and you don't put a split pin in there, you wire it. So you wire that, and then you come round and you go through the other side. So if that was to fall off, the wire would stop it coming out.
Oh, I see.
So
This is on a Type 51.
yeah, and same as the 35, same as all the cars, like, see now that's sticking through, and it's got a wire going through it, and then it goes round. Well, Timothy's done it slightly different. He's split pinned that, and he's just put a wire around that, because at one stage somebody had that nut come off and that fall out. So that has got a hole in it and a wire through it. And when you can see a bit of stuff, you know that hasn't been screwed up and come to the end of its opening out that, because that's important. But what we very often do, we put that and then we put a wire through there. But I think Timothy's right. When we do your car, we'll put a split pin in there and we'll just put a wire around the same as that. I think he's right. Right, so there is your split, and then you make up a taper pin with a nut on the other side of it, and that goes in there like a loony, and then that opens up, and that is what actually drives it, not that. That don't drive it, that just is the thing to open it up. So that hole, it was difficult to get it out, so that will be reamed now, and then the hole in the actual flange will be bigger, so that's not stopping it. And as you force that in, it opens it out slightly, and then it drives on that surface there, which is a lot of people don't seem to understand that. It doesn't drive on the pin, so that will go into about there, and then we'll have about that much sticking up, and we'll drill a hole in it, and then we'll wire it, so if the nut was to ever fall off or whatever, it wouldn't just fall out. But that's going to need a bit of a ream, John, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of debris still in there.
Yeah, that's definitely going to need a bit of a ream, but it all looks good. But this is, this is the jobs that you have to do, because from 1927, all sorts of mechanics would work on it, and they wouldn't necessarily know the ins and outs of a Bugatti. And they are a bit of knowing the ins and outs, because old Bugatti had some, ideas that in this day and age nobody would probably understand. It's like the clutch. The clutch is very clever, but you have to understand it. But that, when that's done, it will not only be safe, but it'll look right.
Good, I'm drilling a split pin hole in the bolt.
Yeah.
To basically put the V block in, holds it in the middle, clamp it all up, and then in theory, just do that. Stops at the end there as well. Put it right through. And that should be in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's just see those ones that are rusty. The ones that came off it. So that's the one that came off it.
Yeah.
Bit pitted.
Well, that obviously, when that piece of leather gets damp, it stays damp, and obviously tends to rust the bolt.
Okay.
But that's 1927. That's been on there since then, probably.
Yeah, it's a few years, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's older than Ivan.
Yeah, that's saying something. Well, some of them are a bit rough. So, but we've got some good ones, second-hand ones, obviously.
See that?
Oh, wow.
Then we can mark it, cut it.
Yeah, leave a lump on. They always go in a bit further.
Well, I thought that last time and I broke it.
So in that...
Yeah, trying to do the nut up, snapped it off.
Got it.
And that's a bit of wire.
Get it out now.
You see, they're all split pinned properly.
Yeah.
So they're all split pinned. And cleaned it all up nice.
Looks
you see,
like
and
brand
that's
new.
a nice new leather. Nice new leather cut pin.
Well, that's good.
Now he's going to bash it out. So now you want to take a picture film of him bashing it out. Give us it, John. Look, there you can see the marks that where it's really pushing on it.
Yeah.
To make it go like that.
Yeah.
So now that will get cut off there.
Yeah.
This will then have a thread put on it with a nut. That will then have a hole drilled in there for putting the wire around. That will get beaten in, and then the nut just holds it in position.
Okay.
Because the nut that goes on there is not strong enough to do that. You've got to beat it in to do that. The nut just stops it falling out.
Okay.
But if the nut was to come off, because It actually is not 7mm, John, it's 6, isn't it? So I made a mistake there. It's not a 7mm nut, it's a 6mm nut. So the nut is only capable of holding it in position. But you see, you get people screw that nut up thinking that they can do that. Well, you can't do that with a little 6mm nut. You've got to do that with a big hammer.
Yeah.
And you can see, look, you can see where it's really hit that taper and made that go like that. So it's a typical quirky bit of Bugatti. Yesterday we were talking about the flexible joint on Susie's steering column and how you have to knock the taper pin in to open it out and blah 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 blah. This I took out of a Type 44 like Susie's, and you can see, I said most people don't understand it. Well look, you can see they've chopped that off there because that should be about that long. And it's undoubtedly because look, it's plated and that's plated. So this is a restoration job by somebody. So they've chopped that off, they put the thing on there and then they put a bloody great bolt in there to hold it instead of relying on the side. So that is the sort of thing that happens over the course of God knows how many years. You know, with people not understanding the Bugatti method, basically. So that re-endorses what I said, really. So that's that, right. On the gearbox, one of the flanges on the Type 35 gearbox goes on, and it goes on a slow taper, and it don't have a pin in it. You just push it on, and they never come off. But, you know, how many people would think that you could put a flange on and just push it on a slow taper? But you can, and they don't come off. But they got to be like perfect. So obviously when they get old, you can drill them and put a pin in them just to be safe. Because, you know, the shaft's a little bit iffy. It's all a bit iffy when it's donkey's years old. But when it's all made new, originally, it didn't have anything in it. It just pushed on. That is like a racing tip. It's the same as on the chain that goes round the brake. The spring links. When you went to Brooklands, the spring links had to have a wire round them through the chain to stop them ever falling out. And if they did fall out, the spring link that is, it couldn't open up and the brakes fail. So that's another sort of thing that they found out, you know, racing them at Brooklands and what have you. And I had a long chat with Guy Griffiths. I went and spent a whole day with Guy Griffiths. I've become very friendly with him, actually, in his old age. He was the man who produced a picture of my dad. What do you have to do with all this then, Ivan? Well, my dad had a garage in... Oh, right. He said, what was his name? And I said, well, he was involved with George Newman. And he walked over to a filing cabinet, went like that, and he pulled out a picture of my dad with George Newman in a Samson. You know, it was quite good, really. But anyway, the thing is with old... Guy he was there, and he said to me, he went through a few of the things that when you went on the when you went to the scrutineering, the rear radius arms on a Bugatti, you had to be able to turn them with your fingers, because they'd obviously had them again, they're like a ball joint that gets a couple of bolts in it, and somebody don't know what they're doing. You know, the thing gets put on the other way around, the ball's a bit bigger, the thing's a bit smaller, you squeeze it up, and the back axle going up and down would break the ball off. So he said the scrutineers always used to go up and turn the radius rods on a Type 35. He said, you know, and if it didn't turn, it failed. And the other thing they did, they used to walk up and the track rod, they used to actually put their feet on the track rod and stand on it. You know, like so the track rod, so they put it in and stand on it like that. Because what happened then was, on a Bugatti, you've got like a spring thing that's inside the ball joint, and it's there to just keep it under tension. It shouldn't have a load of slack. And the other thing they used to do, the ball would wear like an egg, and you couldn't have it tight. So, you know, people who ride Bugattis in them days, they probably didn't know anything really, they just drove the car. So they'd obviously had a drag link fall off. So that's why the old scrutineer used to put his foot on it and stand on it. Inside there's a big spring goes in there, inside that ball joint bit. But the ball joint thing has got to be the right length. So when you screw that up, it's still good, and the spring just takes up the tension. So if you do that, it won't move. And that's how it should be. Well, when I say it won't move, it's got to have clearance. But obviously, the ball has got to be round, because if it's like an egg, it can't, it won't work. So now we're going to talk about ball joints. What happens, this is a Type 35 ball joint. Now that's a terrible old thing, but the only reason I've got that here is because you can see that the ball, right? So anyway, so now you imagine that's on there, and you're going along, and all the dirt is dropping in there, and this is doing this when you're steering it and everything. So they don't last very long. And what happens is the ball becomes like an egg. Now you can see that's like an egg. That's really like an egg. So is that. These are the bigger ones. These are for the touring cars. That is the Type 35 size.
The small one.
And that is one that has which is perfectly round. Now, if you look at this, you'll see what I'm talking about, right? Now, you watch that.
Okay, that's upside down the numbers, but we can maybe tweak it.
You watch that go up as I turn it.
Oh, yeah.
So it goes to 24.9. Look, that's how much that is an egg. Now,
Yeah.
what happens is, that goes in there, and that is a spacer, because on a Bugatti there's no way of adjusting the track. The track rod, or the drag link, is the track rod. The track rod is the right length, as near as damn it. And by putting different spacers in there, you can alter the track. So then that goes in, and then the ball joint, obviously, and then that. But there's something in there. Hang on a sec. Now, those washers are washers, and there's no way we would ever do this, but I haven't got the spacers that go in there because we used to make them to fit the car. But I'm doing this purely as a demonstration, right? So that is a proper spacer, and you might have several of them in there, but you don't have little skinny ones. You have ones like
And
that.
what's that made of?
And that is made of probably silver steel or EN36, and it's hardened. But it doesn't necessarily have to be hardened, because that's just a spacer. Right, now that is the bit that rubs on the ball.
Yeah.
So that has to be hard. So we'd obviously make those and we harden them, or have them hardened probably. Right, so that goes in there, then that goes in there, and then that goes in there. Now, what happens is, if it's all in perfect condition, which if you're going to go fast in one of these cars, that needs to be, that is got just a few thou clearance just there. But if it's all worn out, you can't have a few thou clearance because it's like an egg. And if you watch that, it goes in and out. So 9 out of 10 times, people have got a car that it's like an egg. That screws on there and goes down solid, right? So then, when you move the steering, you press the spring like that. And that is wrong. That should have, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 thou clearance. So we would make a new one of them and get it dead right, but we'd also make a new one of them. So that is, so when you turn the steering and you see that going like that, it ain't right. That spring is just there to take up the few thou clearance to stop it rattling, basically. So that is how the ball joint's done. Now, I have seen these. There was a car done in America, and it actually had on the bill, written on the bill, MIG weld ball joints, set up in lathe and return square. Now, when I first started in this like, I used to spend a lot of time talking to Mr. Conway Senior, who was one of the most qualified engineers in Great Britain, and he knew what he was talking about. So I said to him, right, Mr. Conway, you know, we're going to have to make steering arms. And, you know, I want to get it right, obviously, because it's very important. So he said, okay, my boy. He said, what you have to do, he said, you have to get EN36, which is the nearest type metal. So I think the French, I think it's AD3, but I wouldn't swear to that. But anyway, so you get EN36 because it's very good at standing up to heating up red hot and doing whatever. He said, you get EN36 and you get a certificate with the piece of metal to prove that that's what it is. He said, and then you stamp a number on the part, number 10 or whatever.
Can't quite see that, but okay.
And then you obviously machine it. I've got a special cast iron fixture that drops in, and you heat this up, and you don't heat it up with, I think you heat it up with propane, and you pull it round. He said, and then what you do, you send it off to have it brought up to 55 tonnes, I think it was, and you get it core refined and crack tested, and you get the certificate, and you have number 10 on it. So you've got the certificate for it going to the heat treaters and core refined and blah blah blah, number 10, and then you've got the piece of metal, number 10, and you write it in a book. So he said, if you ever had to go to court and that had come off, you wouldn't be able to say, well, we did everything you could possibly do. Actually, since 1980, we've never ever, and David Hyman went into the bank, if you're seeing our video, and bent all that, and it only bent, it didn't break. But so then you decide you're going to make them. Well, every bloody car's different, so it's no good thinking, oh, I'll make 10 of them, they'll all be the same. Because that bit there, that taper fits in to the upright, where, you know, the stub axle is and everything, there's a slotted hole, and you fit that in. And then it mustn't come to the surface because you want to be able to tighten it up and it goes in solid. I don't know if you've got one there. What it does, it has a washer on there, which is the shape of the thing, and you tighten it up and it has to go in solid. So you have to fit them. You can't, there's no other way. You file them blue in, file them blue, and you get that fitted. And then very often, that's in a different place or that's in a different place. So you do all of that and then you send it off for the heat treating and the blah, 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 blah. And that is how we do it, and that's how we've always done it, and we've never had any aggravation. But I have seen them, I told you about the one Meg welded, we've actually seen a car where they've chopped that off and they've made a ball joint and they've silver soldered it into there, or welded it into there, I can't remember now, but obviously again, I mean, if that breaks off, you're in real serious trouble. So that is why, if you've got the Bugatti and you turn the steering and you see that going in and out like that, it's probably because the ball is like an egg, like that. And the reason it's not absolutely, you know, with no clearance whatsoever, is because you couldn't make it like that, because eventually it'd just break the ball off if you locked it up solid. So, you know, every blooming Bugatti that you ever deal with, very often has to have new ones of them. There's no way around it. I mean, it's a lovely big job and it's a load of hard work, but if you want to do... I mean, I just went upstairs because I've got an official time thing for the Cologne Sprint, and in a Type 35 running on methanol, in a standing kilometre, it went over the line at 136.2 or something like that. So they don't hang about, you know, you're not in a bloody old car that's bowling along at 40 miles an hour. They really go. And the front suspension has to be spot on. Now, very often, years ago, I used to see they had tie rods on them to stop them wrapping up, and they had all sorts of things, and they got wobbly steering and everything. You don't have to modify them. The original shock absorbers, if they're set properly, are perfect, but again, they mustn't have any slack in them. The front springs have got to be perfect. The wedges in the front springs in the square hole have got to be perfect. And above all, the kingpin's got to be perfect. And it has a thou interference fit as you push it into the axle. So what we used to do, we used to make the bottom size of the bush, we used to make it a thou smaller, the first bit that goes in. So that would slide into the axle, and then the next bit was a thou bigger. And we used to clean off the sharp edge, because you can push it into the axle and all you do is broach a lump of metal out the axle, so that ain't no good. So you've got to make sure you thou, nice bit of radius, and then the full size. And then you put it in the press and it goes in, you know. And that is how you do it. And obviously if there's no slack in the kingpin, there's no slack in anywhere, a standard 35 can be driven at 130 odd miles an hour and you can jump on the brakes and they don't do anything. But it's all got to be right, including that. Now what it seemed to be with Bugatti, if he did something that seemed to work, he never changed it. I mean, if you look at a 1924 Type 35, it's like that. And that's how he did it. And that was it. And he carried on doing it. I mean, the 1934 or 30s, whatever, Type 51, same thing. So he didn't change it. But obviously a modern car's got a proper ball joint like that. And if you want to adjust the track, you just screw the track rod in and you'd have a left-hand thread one side and you'd have a right-hand thread the other side, and you could just make that like that to alter the track. Well, he didn't do that. You had to put little spacers in there to set the track. So the width of the the track rod had to be near enough spot on, because you're only just going to adjust it with little spacers like that, and thinner. So it's all a bit difficult, we said. It's not normal. So somebody who's never worked on a bit, they look at all that and think, well, how'd you do that? What a load of old rubbish. And if you've never done it before, it is a load of old rubbish. But if you know of what you're doing and you've worked on them and you've talked about them, then that's it. But that's a modern way of doing it. So that would just have a hole in there. That would come down there and it would have a big thing there, and that would go in there in a table and you put a nut on it. And then when that wore out, you just go and get another one. And it's got a rubber boot, look, to stop the dirt getting in there. Well, Bugatti had nothing. It was like that. So going along, all the old dirt and all the old muck in there, constantly, you know, causing it. Because you could grease it there, but, you know, what could that do? That'd go into there. It ain't going to go anywhere, really. I mean, it works, but it ain't as good as having nothing. So, again, it's a quirky old load of junk, but it's in the best car in the world, in my opinion. I mean, I was totally obsessed with Bugattis, and, you know, I mean, I've gone off it a bit now, but they are good, and every bit you look at is lovely. So there's a couple of little tips, you know, that's got to be done properly. The spring links on the brake chain have got to be done properly. And all the joints on the steering have got to be done properly. Because if you're relying on the spring, obviously when you move the steering, the spring just goes like that. The spring is just there to take the tension up. The actual ball joint should have just a few thou clearance, and then the spring takes the tension up. Very often you go up to a Type 35 and you go like that and you can see the ball joint going in and out. Well, that is wrong. And it's a very common thing, you know. I mean, I've even had mechanics I've had to stop and say, no, we don't do that. Like, that's wrong. And argue with them sometimes. And even actually say at one stage, listen, I'm the governor, the buck stops at me and we ain't doing it like that. And that bloke actually is quite a well-known restorer now. So, you know, you've got to know about these things. And, you know, spending the day with old Guy Griffiths was an absolute knockout. But you see this, look, there's a joint here, look. Now you watch when I move the steering, look, it might move a couple of thou. So you see how it moves very fractionally. Well, that is the spring, just taking up the movement.
And if you steer aggressively?
Oh no, it won't move. don't forget to subscribe.